I'm Alex Glassy. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer of Conductor Software, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you all here. And thanks for setting aside the time. We'll be about 45 minutes, maybe a bit longer. I want to say hi to Louis Glassy. There's a coincidence on the names. We're not quite sure how that happened. Hello, Louis. I'm on the west coast of Canada. Louis is about 2,500 kilometers inland. He's in the center of Canada in Winnipeg. So Louis is going to be manning the chat. And so what I'd like to do today is, as we go through here, really would like to make this as interactive as possible, given the technology that we've got. Unfortunately, we can't be in the same room, but I know you've all got lots to say. And so please feel free to type away merrily in the chat. Lou's pointed out that when you type something in, your little to line, and you can change that to everyone. So I think that's what I'm going to do right now is panelists and attendees. What is it? Is it panelists and attendees, Lou? Is that what people change it to?
And I just threw that in the chat as well.
Yeah, great. All right, perfect. So thanks, Lou. So anyway, keep your eye on the chat. I am going to see if I can share my screen right now. Always a challenge. And let's get rocking and rolling. All right. By the way, this is a picture. If you can, Lou, can you see my screen? Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks. Yeah. So this is a picture of where I live. That's Sprout Lake, and that's Mount Arrowsmith in the background. And so I'm kayaking just about on a daily basis out there, and soon to start fishing. So loving it. Let's get into the slide deck. Okay, so Lou, thumbs up. You can see the slides?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so about 45 minutes to go. That said, we're happy to stick around for as long as you guys like, if you just want to sit and chat, or if you have specific questions about, the topic or anything else. This is a real opportunity for us to get social in this time of COVID. What we're going to talk about today is why transformation in 2021 is a near certainty for just about every organizations, and then how low psychological safety creates fierce resistance to change, and then how we can ameliorate that, how we can support people to lift that. Pardon me. A little bit about us. So we are a global analytics platform, global leadership analytics platform. Essentially, this is what I want to bring your attention to: is we help leaders create safer and more productive workplaces. Those two things actually go hand in hand. We deliver unique insights and recommendations. We'll talk more about this, how we came to our name at the end, but right now let's get right into this thing. So this should wake everybody up. 34% of CEOs say that their transformation projects were successful. Now I took out the word only. Only 34% of CEOs say that their transformation projects were successful, which leaves 66% unsuccessful. And if you go down the ranks and ask people in those organizations whether the transformation projects were successful, the number of people who says that it's successful actually decreases until you get to frontline employees. And then only 6% of frontline employees say that the transformation projects that went on in their organizations were successful. So this is a shocking number, because we've got transformation projects all over the map. And if 2/3 of them fail, what does that say? And what does that do? What are the consequences of that? In 2020, absolutely everything changed. And what I'd like to do is just put up a real fast poll. So I want to get this interactivity going, a real fast poll to ask 3 questions. And I'm wondering if, Lou, you can pop that up right now. So just really quickly, let's take 20 seconds on this one. Was your organization affected by last year's events? Simple yes or no. And last year, of course, the whole COVID thing, if anyone needs a reminder. Did your organization manage last year's changes really well? And I think by really well, I mean, is your organization better now than it was pre-COVID? If it's better now, then you manage really well. And do the people around in your organization, do the people in your organization feel better or worse now than they did before COVID? So do people feel worse now? Then put worse. And if they feel better now, then put better. All right. I can't see the results. Lou, what's going on? Leave it open for another 10 seconds or so. Can't hear you, Lou.
Answers are coming in, and I just let everyone know that it is an anonymous poll.
Right.
75% of the way there. So yeah, another few seconds, we should be good to go.
All right. Let's give people another 10 seconds or so, and then we'll talk about this. We'll give you the results in just in a couple of minutes. All right. Let me keep going. All right, Lou, you're happy to take that poll down anytime. Okay, so back into the chat, and Lou, I'm going to count on you to. I'm blind to the chat right now, so if you could let me know. But what I want to do is I've got 4 little bullets I want to put up, and I just want you to respond kind of yes or no. Everything changed, as we know, and so did this happen to you? Do customers buy from you differently than they did before? Do you purchase differently from your suppliers differently than you did before? So, Lou, what are you seeing in the chat? You got a bunch of yeses or nos?
Nothing yet. Waiting for people.
Come on, gang.
To the chat. There we go. So Mary says yes. Steve Sharp says yes and yes.
All right.
So a lot of yeses coming in.
All right. Beautiful. So I think really, really interesting, of course, and we'll talk about this as well, is that, if customers are buying from us differently, we've got to sell to them differently. If we're purchasing from our suppliers differently, then they've got to sell to us differently. And so all these, if anyone changes, then everything changes. Our workplace has been disrupted. If you're not working in the same places you work for, then the workplace has been disrupted. And really interesting is you start to think about the old traditional way of working, where everyone from the outside of the city, the suburbs, kind of came into the inside of the city, let's say New York, for example, and now we're not. Just think about the changes that makes. If I don't have to go into an office to work anymore, I actually don't even need a car. I don't need a garage to put the car. I don't need fuel to put in the car, which is going to sit in my garage. I don't need parking space at the other side. Never mind, I don't need the office space. Billboards along the way that are designed to catch my attention are actually now not effective at all. So as an advertiser, why would I use billboards, which is going to affect the billboard companies? The place I used to drive through to pick up my coffee in the morning, I'm not sure what's happening to them, and the place I would buy my lunch at lunch day. So all of these changes, just simply because I no longer have to work. And in fact, what's happening is, like Spotify, for example, just said to all of their employees, they've got thousands of employees working in their head office. They've just said, you don't have to come in. And in fact, you can work from anywhere, even if it's another state, or I imagine country. So think about what that does to now your workforce. Think about what that does to property, and what your home, your home has got to be different because you want to have a separate office space, and so on and so on. Everything is changing. A headline from the New York Times last week: remote work is here to stay. Manhattan may never be the same. And technology projects have been accelerated. If people are going to get sick and can't come in, then I'm going to make, as a manager, I may make a decision to invest more in technology. Certainly, meeting technology, Zooms. We all know Zoom, the verb we now use, that means something different than it ever used to before. Their market capitalization went up by $140 billion in the 8 months right after COVID, and they're now trading at about 6 times what they were a year ago. So other things have changed. Some organizations and industries have more work. Health delivery, of course, are overburdened. Grocery stores, absolutely booming. Delivery organizations, tech companies, and of course, all kinds of organizations have less work. And any one of these creates stress. So Lou, I'm wondering if you can, if you've got the poll results there, if you can give them to us. Was your organization affected by last year's event? No surprise that 100% of people said yes. Did your organization manage last year's changes really well? That is a surprise to me. Good for you, for those 55% of people who said that their organizations managed that change really well. That's outstanding. Do the people around your organization feel better or worse? Of course, they feel worse. Even in organizations where you managed, the change was managed really, really well, it still takes such a toll on people, the overwork, the uncertainty, all the things we're going to talk about. All right, thanks, Lou. That's great. All right, let's keep going. So the change continues in 2021. We reacted in 2020. Nobody, it was unforeseen. I remember I was sitting in Australia, planning to be there for another 3 or 4 months, and then planning to go over to Europe. I was going to work in Europe for 4 or 5 months before coming back to Canada. And end of February 2020, I'm starting to hear a couple of things. And by the first week of March, I'm concerned and on the phone to my travel agent. And by March 15th, I left. So but that was completely reactive. And then our little company had to, everything completely reacted. And I think that's what we did last year, is we reacted to a huge uncertainty. Now that we have a sense of kind of what it is, we're not out of the woods yet. Still, COVID is out there. The variants are coming. But the vaccines are being deployed for better or for worse, and still lots of unknowns. But we also know that we're never, ever going to go back to the way things used to be. Why not? Well, now we know, for example, that I don't need to get on a plane. Like for 40 years, I thought that in order to sell to someone, I had to get on a plane and go visit them and then take them out to a fancy restaurant and wine and dine them. It wasn't that the way it's supposed to be. But now we know that you don't have to do any of that, and the selling can still continue. So we know that even if we were to get back, to snap back to a completely COVID-free world, we're never going to go back to the way things were, because now we know we don't have to. And what's happening is that it gives us an opportunity to be more deliberate in 2021. So, for example, online purchasing and ordering, we now know that that's huge. Amazon stock price almost doubled in the last year. Automation, we've already talked about a little bit. Meetings, we know. And so even though we're mechanizing and we're doing the efficiency stuff over there, we also know that the people side needs to be done differently. We're meeting differently. Innovation and creativity, we can't all get together in a room with whiteboards. We now got to do it differently. And it's tough doing it differently. And decision-making and managing, how do you make decisions when, again, you're so far apart from each other, even if it's just down the block, but you just can't get on the plane? And how do you manage people that are so far away from you? You cannot get this in-person thing. So 2021 is going to be more deliberate for many organizations, but still we got some problems ahead. If there's a change project do you have a change project underway in your organization, like right now, a deliberate change project? Just type yes in the chat and let us know while I have a bit more tea here. What are we seeing? Any deliberate projects out there, Lou?
Yeah, there's a few yeses and a few no's. Sorry, there's a few yeses and 1 no.
And 1 no. Okay. All right. Yeah. So change is upon us. And as I mentioned before, change begets change. Because these changes are coming, and because change will in another organization is going to affect our organization. So we either have to respond, or we have our own, deliberate change project underway. These ripples are going to go back and forth, and it's going to be probably a couple of years before things kind of stabilize and settle into whatever the new normal is. Of course, this character, this Chinese character, is a crisis. Crisis has the 2 pieces, danger and opportunity. And I think we have a decision to make. If we know that change is upon us and we can't avoid it, we have a choice whether we're going to be responsive or whether we just actually want to get ahead of it and do it well. But I think change is actually accelerating, and I think change can become or will become more or less continuous. It will be more or less continuous for the next couple of years. So we can simply respond, or we can innovate, and innovate equals change plus improvement, right? Organizations that use a crisis to their advantage, if you take a look back to 2007, 2008, for example, organizations that as they were coming through that particular crisis went, oh, there's a crisis, we're going to use it to our advantage. And so they actually went and innovated like crazy. And now those companies are actually on the public companies that did that actually turned themselves into innovation or grabbed a hold of innovation are on the stock market are doing 30% or more better on average than the S&P 500, than the average of all the stocks. So they've propelled themselves beyond their rivals who either didn't do it deliberately and were either responding, or who didn't do it well. Remember, that only 34% of those CEOs said that their transformation projects were a success. So how did they do this? What differentiates the ones that don't do it well and the ones that do it well? What turns a dangerous crisis into an opportunity? And of course, it's people. It's your people and how they're able to address the crisis. So what do they need? What do people need in a crisis to turn the danger into an opportunity? So the first thing they need is clarity. So think about yourself. And for the rest of these 5 things, think about yourself. And over the last year, were you clear about what was going on, about what the nature of your work was going to look like, and what was going to happen even into next week or 2 weeks from now? I know that, look, there was a week there when I was in Australia, the last week in Australia, and Karen and Linda and I were sitting at the table looking around at each other and looking at the team and just going, wow, we have no idea. So we want to have clarity about what's going on and what's going to happen. Trust. We want to feel trusted. We want people to be honest with us, even if it's not good news. It's way better to know what's going on, even if we know the bad news, than it is to be left in the dark. Being left in the dark is an awful place to be. We need connection. And this is I think the fundamental thing that's been shattered by COVID. All those little social connections that we used to have during the day have been removed from us. And I don't think we even realized just how important those things were to us until now they're gone. So we need connection. We need fairness. This is particularly true when we're going through a transformation, because in transformations, it's the frontline workers, it's people and supervisors and mid-level managers that are really asked to do a big bulk of the extra work. You're going to work harder. You're going to work harder with less resources. We don't know whether it's going to be successful or not. There's maybe a question about if you're going to have a job, where you're going to work, how are you going to work, all kinds of questions swirling around. And yet we know that if we do work hard, that the benefit of that working hard is going to accrue most times to the organization itself. The organization will win if the transformation project goes well. And sometimes we think that the senior leaders, the CEO and the executive branch, are the ones that are going to actually make off with the bigger part of the advantage, and we get left with just a bunch of overtime and an angry partner at home because we haven't been there. We've been working. So fairness is critical to us. The last piece is acknowledgement, is validation. It's to be listened to and heard. If things are going well, hey, listen, validate that, acknowledge that, give me a pat on the back. If things are not going well, for me personally, I want somebody to hear and listen and be compassionate about the situation. Those are things that we need. If these things are low, it creates anxiety and brain freeze and an inability to really do the job well. And in particular, with regard to fairness and acknowledgement, sometimes there's an unwillingness. There's a reciprocity with these things. If you listen to me, I'll listen to you. If you're generous with me, I'll be generous with you. If you forgive me my mistakes, I'll forgive you. Right? There's this reciprocity going on. If that doesn't come from the organization, I may be less and less willing to actually do what's asked of me, or for sure go the extra miles. Transformation programs or projects are super dynamic with incredible amounts of detail that simply can't be foreseen and planned for. And it needs people to feel comfortable to discuss things, to give of themselves, to bump their noses, pick themselves up, get back to it. People need to learn constantly, remember things, and then work things out both for themselves and by themselves, and then with others. These are difficult things. Imagine yourself working in a team when these things are low, when clarity, trust, connection, fairness, acknowledgement are low. So things are unclear. I feel untrusted. I'm isolated. Things are unfair, and I'm ignored. How much am I going to contribute to whatever the heck is going on in the organization? It's not going to be good. But imagine yourself working in a team when these things are high, when things are clear. Maybe the future isn't clear, and maybe the outcome isn't clear, but I've got clarity around things like I have a daily meeting with my manager and my team to talk about the nature of things. I'm clear that if there's a problem, we're going to work together to solve it. I feel trusted. I feel trusted that my manager, my team will, let me just go and do my stuff and do it the way that I see is the best way. I feel connected with the people that are around me. Things are fair. When we're all working hard, we're all suffering and putting in the longer hours. But we also, whenever we hit a milestone, we also share a celebration, and there's a bit of a reward, even if it's little things. But these types of things make it seem that things are fair, and which means that I'm going to be able to reciprocate of my time and my energies, and then I feel heard. And if I'm feeling good, I get someone's there to pat me on the back and say, "Hey, way to go!" And if I'm not feeling good, there's someone there to listen and to commiserate with me. These are the things that that we're talking about match exactly the 5 things that make up psychological safety, which is at the heart of workplace behavior. And I'm just going to go through them really briefly, and then I'll define psychological safety. So clarity gives us certainty. And when I'm certain of things, of what's going to happen, what my world looks like now, and in particular what's coming, when I feel certain, my brain relaxes, and a lot of energy would otherwise be trying to figure out what's going to come and worrying and fretting, and that doesn't happen. And so I'm much more relaxed. Trust leads to this sense of autonomy. I can go and do the work that I need to do. Connection, of course, is relatedness when we talk about the science of psychological safety. Fairness leads to a sense of equity. And acknowledgement in the eyes of acknowledgement from others means that I matter to other people, and gives me that sense of significance, and also leads into my own self-image, which really boosts my self-image. Now, these 5 things, of course, have this. The first letters all form this lovely word cares as a mnemonic. Psychological safety, here's a definition of it. Some of you have seen this before. A belief that I will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up. And I highlight that word particularly with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. Think about any kind of change process, never mind a transformation process, which is much broader, more sweeping. We can't possibly imagine and plan for and account for all the things that are going on in everyone's desk, and therefore and everyone's work, and therefore we need people to come up with their own ideas of how to solve the things that are going to come up, to be able to ask questions. Hey, can I get some clarification? Or what does that mean? Concerns. If we do that, that might affect this. Maybe we should talk about that a little bit more, or mistakes, right? I need to be able to speak about mistakes. Whoa, that's not going to work. Let's not do that again. If I don't even talk about that, you've lost a huge part of the ability to make this thing successful. And if you multiply that by 1,000 frontline workers and 100 supervisors, if half of them just aren't in the game because they don't feel capable of speaking up, then we've got a half of the organization that's really just kind of floating, and it's going to be bumping into things along the way. No one's really steering that particular ship, or not, at least not steering it very, very well. So let's move, speaking up to the top here. You'll notice I've changed the title to Leadership and Team Dynamics. Psychological safety is a social thing. It works when we're with other people. And speaking up really is the ability to communicate. That's the first step. If I can communicate, it means I can collaborate with other people. And if I can collaborate, it means I can be creative in problem solving, creative in innovating, creative in doing new things, looking at things in different ways. And these things are at the heart of every single team in your organization. In fact, we can use these to categorize the teams in your organization like this. Teams that are not really able to communicate very well are level C teams. Low trust. Every individual has low trust even of their peers and of the organization itself. In fact, one of the biggest failings of transformation projects is that the staff actually just simply don't trust management, don't trust that management's got their backs, don't even trust what management says. And you saw that the discord at the very beginning when 34% of CEOs are going, woohoo, our transformation was a success. And only 1/6 of their staff are actually agreeing with them. 5/6 are sitting there going, I don't know what that person is talking about, but this does not feel like success to me. People are self-protective. They work only as directed. They'll, do that, don't do that. That's the way they are. And they work as individuals. They come in at the beginning of the day, they do their thing protectively, and then they go home. Once people are feeling, starting to feel a little safer and can communicate a bit more, now we've actually opened up the conversation. And now we have some collaboration. We have level B teams, growing trust in the people around me, and maybe even with the organization as a whole. I'm much less protective. I don't feel like I'm going to have arrows coming at me. In fact, I may feel that my team is actually starting to look out for me as I will look out for them. So I don't have to be as self-protective as I would have been. We need some direction and support still, but we're starting to work in teams. Then when things get really, really well, when we're collaborating really, really well, we get into level A teams. Level A teams have a super high degree of trust with each other and also with the organization. Spontaneous creativity and self-directing. You don't have to tell them what to do. Just have to simply say, hey, here's a problem, here's a challenge. They'll go figure it out because they've got all the interpersonal skills to be able to work the problem, come up with a solution. Their minds are available to be fully creative and problem solving. They work as a single unit. It's beautiful to watch. So how do we get from level C to level B to level A? Fairly straightforward. None of this is rocket science. The first thing is, for those level C teams, we have to start by building safety. And here's some ways of doing that. Real-time, honest communication and information, especially about the future. Allow people to set their own priorities and set up their work day, set up their day in their own way. Always treat everyone with respect and civility, no matter what's going on. Anger at perceived mistakes is absolutely toxic. Give credit to other people constantly. Admit mistakes of your own. Align the reward structure so that people are feeling that things are equitable and fair. Give public recognition for good things. Attaboy, Lou, you did a fantastic job. Way to go, Karen. Good on you. Constantly. Building safety isn't just getting our level C teams to level B. Building safety has got to be there all the way through. You're always sitting there thinking about, how can I help these people feel comfortable and psychologically safe. Once we get to level B teams, you start to work on collaborative skills. So people are starting to talk, but sometimes people aren't talking and communicating very well. So things like turn taking. We now need to teach people how to take turns. And a big part of taking turns is listening, to listen actively and empathetically, not just waiting until someone else has spoken so I can rush in there with my own perspective, but really considering what the other person has to say and being empathetic. If they're talking about something personal going on, let's pause and let's take a minute. I love the concept of check-ins and check-outs at every meeting. I mean, if it's just a 10-minute meeting, maybe you're minimizing that. But when I have sessions with clients that are typically 60 to 90 minutes, I'm trying to allow 10 minutes at the front and 5 minutes at the back at least. And the 10 minutes at the front is probably really the most important. We just go around the circle and we allow people to just let everyone else know how they're doing. It could be work related, could be personal related, but really it's how they're feeling. And whatever comes out, it's good. And what you find over the course of time as you do that, meeting after meeting after meeting, people start to relax into the meeting itself, and they know that they can bring whatever there's been on their minds or in their hearts. They can bring it to the room, and they got the few minutes to be able to just set it down. It's going to be accepted by everybody, and now they're there now they can actually, that they freed themselves with that. Now they can actually be a part of the rest of the discussion. So I love check-ins and check-outs. Building teamwork, again, you got to keep going all the way through to the end. Level 8 teams, what do they need? They need challenges. They need challenges. They're geared up. They're excited. You don't have to motivate them or fire them up. They come to work like that. They love the people that they're working with, and just give us something. Gimme, gimme, gimme. And so you can throw all kinds of stuff at them. And where a challenge to a level C team would crush them, or would be a source of, they would abandon it, they would ignore it, they would look away from it, they would fight amongst each other. And you'll see that I've got a couple of case studies coming up, and you'll see that exact thing in one of the case studies. But for level 8 teams, they thrive on this stuff. They'll share the problems amongst themselves and give them the responsibility to fix it, and then celebrate the result. So what happens to resistance and resilience? If I've got this continuum down the left-hand side, what happens to resistance and resilience when we improve psych safety? And what does happen is, here's our little lonely team down there, C-level team. And as we start to move them, they start to feel less isolated, less anxious, and less like individuals. And finally, we get to a place where they're confident members of a mutually supportive team. It's lovely to watch when you see this happening. So if you're at the start of a change change process, imagine that you could actually measure this, if it was higher or lower, if you'd have a sense of whether your organization was really able to undertake any significant change. Imagine if that 66% of CEOs had known ahead of time that their organization was not ready to take on a transformation project. Imagine that. What would they do? Some might bulldoze on. Some might not do it at all. Some might go, is there any way that I can ameliorate or improve how my people are doing so that we can take on that transformation project? In order to do that, we have to have some kind of way of doing it. And here's how you do it. You take those 5 pieces that are fundamental to psychological safety. You'd see if we could measure them. In fact, we can. And there we have kind of level C, level B, and level A teams. You can see this organization is got some issues. I wonder if we could do this, if we could actually work on that and get those issues improved, at least over that kind of line right there, so that we have no one that's really resistant. Now we have people, this is a real advantage. And now we have a much better capacity for handling change, being a little more resistant to it, and being a part of the solution. This is kind of like, if some of you know FFA or force field analysis, this is kind of like this. What we're trying to do is we got forces that are actually saying, no, we're going to resist, and you get forces that say, no, we can manage this, and it comes to some kind of status quo. But if we can actually lift that, we can minimize the downward pressure that keeps us down, your chances of success go up significantly. Unfortunately, most organizations, most senior leaders in organizations see their organization like this. It's a bunch of teams. Like here I have 70 teams, and I don't know much about them other than I know that they're working and I know what they're supposed to do, but I really don't have a sense of whether or not they're going to be able to handle this. Imagine that we could do this. Now here's the same 70 teams, but now what we've got, and this is the heat map of an actual organization just prior to doing a large 18-month ERP project. And what we've got is now this psychological safety profile of each team. And you can see over on this corner where we've got purple and greens that those very high psychological safety, much more resilience, much more creativity. So any team that doesn't have kind of an orange or a red in it, and you can see there's probably only about, I don't know, 10 of them, those teams are level A teams, and they're ready. They're ready, chomping at the bit. Let's go. Look at the teams, though, that have some red in them. Now, some of them only have maybe kind of 1 or 2 bits of red. And okay, so maybe that's not so bad. But you can see that there's probably half the teams here that have got some significant issues, and not just one issue, multiple issues that are absolutely going to get in the way of any kind of transformation project. And in this particular organization, they were absolutely blown away when they saw this, because they had thought that, hey, everything's the same. We got 70 teams. They're hired the same. They're trained the same. They're managed the same. Surely to goodness, we got the same thing out there, and nothing could be further from the truth. This caused them to pause and to take some considerable time out to then go back into their teams and revisit what was going on to try to resolve this. And then they were actually quite successful at moving some of this stuff up into the yellow and into the green areas, which was fantastic. Here's another case study. This is a Canadian communications company. I really like this leader who came to me and said, we're about to do a significant piece of transformation in my area of, I don't know, a couple of thousand people. And I want to make sure that my senior leadership team is actually feeling really, really good about this. Like we're a solid, cohesive team ready to work together at this, because if we're not, then it's going to be a problem. So a courageous person, said, let's do a quick check. And we did, and the results came back like this. Now, what we did is what's called a PS25 survey. That's a survey that we've got. PS stands for psychological safety, and it's 25 questions. And here are the 25 questions. You can see there's 5 for C's for certainty, 5 measure A, autonomy, 5 for relatedness, 5 for equity, 5 for significance. So you've got those 5 pieces that we've been talking about for the last half hour. And you can see that, and it's a score out of 100, 0 to 100, and anything over 80 is level A performance. So it's just fantastic. These are great scores. Like just, and this person was really proud because they've been doing a lot of work to make sure that the team and the leadership team really is working well together. Great scores, nothing to worry about. Or what if we look a little different, look a little deeper, and what we do inside our software, we can actually drill down into little different groupings. And here's one of the groupings, just to show you what happened. One of the groupings, and you can see that there's a couple of questions that are issues here. I got to move this thing out of the way. There we go. There's a couple of things that are just not quite as high, and there's a couple of concerns. The 58s, everything that's level C shows up with black text. Well, let's see, what is that? Members of my team adapt to unexpected changes in the environment. Hang on, I'm about to go into a transformation project, and there's a team there that is self-reporting that they've got issues dealing with unexpected changes in the environment. Okay, so their level of certainty is quite low. Something to think about. What else? Work is allocated fairly in my team. So again, this reciprocity mechanism is actually hurt. It's hurting because these people are feeling that things are not fair. And now we're going to be asking more of me. On top of everything else that isn't fair, you're going to be asking more of me. How well is that going to be responded to? And then I feel my manager trusts I will do as it expected of me. Wow, when trust is low in transformation projects, the transformation project don't go. So now we've got here is a leader who's got eyes wide open and is now working actively to address the particular concerns in this particular team. All right, here's another one. This is a national utility in the United States. They were going through, almost being forced to go through a massive transformation project, but good on them. When we better press the pause button because we have a suspicion that, all is not, ready for us to do a massive transformation project. And you can see by just the colors and of course some of the numbers that overall this organization is quite different than what that Canadian communication company was, right? I don't think there's an 80, that's about it, right? There's no 86s or 92s, right? So then what we did is we said, well, let's take a look at all of the operational teams and see what's going on even further. Here is a list of all the operational teams. And you can see it does not look good. First of all, overall, it looks much paler. The colors are paler, which means the numbers are lower. You can see black lettering throughout, which means that there's some pretty low scores here. And then you can see distinct themes, both vertically and horizontally. So horizontally, or sort of vertically here, R1, R3, E4. Well, R1 and R3 is in the relatedness piece. And these scores are absolutely abysmal. I mean, I've never seen a 27, 29, 34. These are 33. These are very, very low scores. And what's happening here is that we got teams here that are actually fighting each other. Never mind just coming in and putting my head down and getting out. You got people here who are actively, there's conflict in these particular teams. You can, it's like taking a military squad into battle with no unity, and even worse, they're actively fighting each other. Meanwhile, they should be facing, turning and spears out, if you will, and facing whatever challenge or enemy is out there. It's just, so this is throughout the entire organization. And then E4 is back to fairness, right? Equity, fairness. So there's resentment already, and then we're going to layer on top something else. We can also look at things horizontally on a team by team basis. And here we've got a team here. That's, whoops, my apologies. Checklist: turn off phone before starting webinar, and then turn mic on. So here's a team here, and you can see that they're much paler across the entire way. And we know the E2, we've seen that before, right? Work is allocated fairly, but then look at the S scores. S's significance, and the two of these scores are really reflecting on how they feel about the leader. So we're getting no acknowledgement from the leadership, no acknowledgement from the organization. And so that reciprocity mechanism in this particular team, and I think in others, but for sure in this particular team, is just broken. And you cannot ask this team to do more. What you'll see here is you'll see increasing resentment. You'll see increasing levels of absenteeism. You'll see turnover. People just leave when you see things like this. All right. For their transformations to succeed, says McKinsey, who does a lot of this type of work, organizations need buy-in at all levels. Otherwise, you're going to be one of those 66% of those CEOs. How do we do this? And I know I'm 45 minutes in, so give me another couple of minutes and we'll finish this off here. Communication is the key that supports transformation. If people need clarity, then we need to communicate clearly, because this builds certainty. By the way, today's webinar is brought to you by the letter C. Actually, it's not. I got some other letters coming up soon. Here we go. People need trust. We need to communicate candidly. This builds that sense of autonomy. People need connection. We want to communicate collaboratively, particularly listening. Communication does not mean speaking. Communication means listening and speaking, right? 2 ears, 1 mouth, I think my mother once told me. This builds relatedness. fairness, communicate consistently. And not only communicating consistently, like communicating the same way all the time, but communicate consistently about things, making sure that the messages themselves contain consistency. Hey, we all need to work a little harder. Hey, we just successfully completed that milestone, and so we're all having a party. We are all getting Friday off, or what have you. This builds that sense of equity. People need acknowledgement, so communicate compassionately about whatever's going on. Happily when they've got something to celebrate, and then empathetically when they've got something that's not so good. This helps to build significance, helps people to feel that they matter in the eyes of the people around them, and that is it's huge. It's probably the most important one. Well, they're all important. Now, if you think that this all looks like aspects of leadership, you'd be absolutely right. And that brings us back to why we selected the name of the company. And I'll let you read that. This is what we're all about, is to helping leaders really help their teams to play their best together. All right, how can we help? We can help in a number of different ways. We've got the PS25 survey, as you've already seen, and that allows us to give you insights into where the psychological safety is in your organization and in your teams. So you can start to get a sense of kind of where there is risk and where there is opportunity, and then what to do about that. We can do a deeper dive with you in what's called a conductor audit. And what that does is it takes the psychological safety stuff, but then on top of that, it adds your internal KPIs. So here I've got an internal benchmark of certain metrics or OKRs, KPIs, whatever you want to call them, key performance indicators. And you can see here that what we've done is we've converted that into financial risk. We've quantified that in terms of financial risk and opportunity to help you get a sense of where you should be prioritizing from a business perspective. And then we can put the psychological safety here on the x-axis, put a KPI performance on the y-axis. The size of the bubble is the size of the financial opportunity. And then this allows you to, again, move from level C to level B to level A. That's what this chart helps you to do, and a bunch of other charts besides. So that's a conductor audit. We can help you with curriculum and accreditation on all these things, how to look at your organization through the lens of the people, but also linking that with the KPI. So we teach all of that in our curriculum and accreditation. And then if you need help inside your organization, we've got an international network of accredited professionals who have all gone through the curriculum and are specialists in their own field with regard to leadership and people and change and transformation projects. We'd be happy to introduce you to them. Hey, here's one way to get started, and that's to do a micropilot. What is a micropilot? It's just do a PS25 survey across a small team, let's say less than 20 people, just like I did with that national communications company in Canada. At the end of it, you'll receive an executive briefing plus an executive summary report, and the whole thing doesn't take very long. It could be done like within a week, actually, but 2 weeks is comfortable. And if you want to learn more about that, then just reach out to us at partners@conductorsoftware.com. Next webinar, hey, 3 weeks from now. This one is going to be a fun one. The last meter where good sales go to die. And when we've done a lot of correlations with between organizations' KPIs and psychological safety. And it turns out that things that are related to customers, so customer satisfaction, and then some of those sales metrics actually are tightly linked into psychological safety. And so we've got might have 4 case studies, and we're going to walk through that and just show you exactly how that works. Now, by the way, don't show up if you've got more than enough sales. If you if you don't have enough sales, if you want to increase your sales by 5, 10, 15, 20%, simply by learning some of these things, then show up. And I think, Lou, have you put the link into the chat?
I will do that right now.
Okay, so everyone take a look in your chat. So I need you to click your mouse one more time. Is that in the chat now, Lou?
Yep.
Okay, great, thanks. So Lou's put the URL of that webinar in the chat. Click on it right now, And then as soon as this webinar ends, you can go and sign up for that. And I'd love to see you in 3 weeks to talk about that. That's going to be a fun one. As you can see, there's all kinds of cowboy things that we can do to make that one fun. Finally, thanks. It's great to see you. We had a good turnout today. If there's any questions, comments, we're happy to stick around right now. If you want to reach out to us on a one-on-one to talk about how some of this stuff might apply to you and your organization, who is going to be going through transformation projects in 2021, you can book a meeting on the website, or reach out to us at partners@conductorsoftware.com. If you want to do a micro pilot, listen, we can be doing one. We can start one off by the end of tomorrow if you want. So think about that. Can I stop sharing the screen, Lou? And
yeah, we have a few really great questions that have been popping up in the chat. So
okay, great.
Uh,
Thanks, Kathy and Nanette, and Silva, and Martin, and Sharon. What are the CARES in the report? So Margaret, that's a great question. So CARES is simply the acronym for the 5 fundamental pieces that make up collectively psychological safety. And so the C is certainty and autonomy and relatedness and equity and significance. Those are the 5 things that collectively, they're not individual strands, they're all related, of course, but you can tease out each one of those. They collectively make up our sense of psychological safety.
So we have a question from Ken as well, which was, how would you describe the role of leadership in regards to creating a culture of resilience in organizations?
That's a great question, Ken. That is the question. So if I could give you something, you were right here, I'd give you something, maybe a coffee cup. That's the question, because leadership is absolutely the most important thing in creating psychological safety. In fact, my sense of psychological safety is impacted by between 50 and 70% from my direct supervisor, not necessarily the CEO, not necessarily the executive, but my direct supervisor. So if they're managing me well, if they're CARES, using the CARES model and listening and all the rest of stuff, my sense of psychological safety is going to be higher. Does that answer that question as clearly? I think it's straight to the point. Leadership is everything. And that's why we call ourselves a leadership analytics company, because as we're measuring psychological safety, we're really measuring how well leaders are doing in supporting their teams.
Another great question from Finton, and it's tangentially related, pretty much the next step. How do you manage up the organization to create psychological safety for yourself?
That's a really, really good point. I think what you want to do is, first of all, I mean, this is long conversations. I think it's time to crack a something and talk about this for the rest of the afternoon, Finton. So let's do that. But yeah, it's tough to do. But what you can do is, start with your team. Anyone can lead. Anyone can act as a leader, and you do that by just in your own team. For example, watch the next meeting of your team, even if the supervisor is there, and see if anyone is trying to speak and is not getting a chance to speak, and pause for them. Just interject and say, "Oh, can we just pause for a minute? I think Mary was trying to say something. Mary, is there something you want to say?" Or I think Sam had a question. Sam, do we get an opportunity to answer your question? If you just do things like that, what you'll start to see is almost immediately, it's easy to dash psychological safety, but it's also not difficult to start to raise it. And as you start to do that, you can create norms inside your team, which are going to be picked up. Then moving up the chain, listen, that's a whole other discussion, much longer one. Is that helpful, Finton? So start where you're at, start where you're sitting.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I completely agree with you. I think that if you build psychological safety among your team, that culture will then start to build out. So if you can build this positivity and this trust, for me, trust is a huge part. If you can build that, then it will expand out, and you'll just see it happening. It's part of the culture change that you can be a part of. So a follow-up question from Ken, which was, how often does Conductor actually work with the leadership team?
It's a great question. So Conductor software, our job as we see it is to support other people to make the work. So we're a tools company and a research company and an analytics company. That being said, we're also a curriculum company. So we teach people the concepts, we teach people the tools, we teach people how to marry that with the skill sets that they do. So we do two types of projects, Ken. The first project is where we're working alongside a CEO, a consultant who's working with a particular client. So I've got one, in fact, an hour. I'll be working with a consultant who's working with a tech company in Australia, and that person is doing all of the work of the assessing and understanding and the delivery work and everything else. What I do is I take some of the data together and help that consultant interpret the results and then transmit that back using her particular skill set. That being said, I do get involved, or we do get involved in meeting with senior executives, but it's typically to make presentations of the results. So we'll stand beside the consultant. Another type of project is doing it with an internal team. So we have an internal team, oftentimes led by either an operational manager, like a sales manager, or it could be the HR team. And so they're running everything, and they're going to be delivering the results, but they need our help to do the assessment, do the interpretation, and then come up with some kind of plan that's going to take, they're going to roll out over the next year. So we work very, very closely with them. And what we also do is we have this network of people around the world, and we bring them in on an as-needed basis for advice, and then to help out if, for example, if the internal team doesn't have enough resources in the next short term. So I hope that long-winded answer satisfied, Ken.
Another question from Chalonnet. I hope I pronounced that right. Have you worked with startups that are early on their journey to establish culture? How would you help to establish a psychologically safe environment up front and ensure that it stays during hypergrowth?
Yeah, that's an absolutely great question. We don't do a lot of work with startups, and the reason that we don't work so often with startups is because startups. And listen, I've started up several companies. Lewis has just sold his first startup successfully at the beginning of the year. So way to go, Lou! That was a fabulous job, 3.5 years. What we typically find is that in startups, you've got the founding people are really close to their people already, so they're innately getting some of this stuff. Doesn't take much for them to learn a couple more skills, so that as the company grows, that then trickles down into the next level and the next level. There's all kinds of curriculum out there, so we can point you in the direction of curriculum, other resources. Keep showing up at these webinars. Go to our website, etc., and we'll be delighted to share that stuff with you. What other questions have we got?
One more question. This is from Keith. Can you provide an example of intrinsic equity, and is it linked to the significance element?
I wonder if you can define, Keith, intrinsic equity. And while Keith is doing that, Lou, let's find us another question.
Sure. So Yves Olivier asks, how do you combine the CARES methodology with an individual performance review or sprint agile methodology regarding team delivery?
Yeah, so the performance reviews are on an individual goal. So you're setting individual goals and looking at individual characteristics, and that's one thing completely different. What psychological safety does is it takes a look at team and leadership dynamics. So it is they actually work hand in hand. Like there's absolutely no conflict. They walk beside each other, if you will. You'll want to be doing the individual reviews for sure, but you'll also want to be doing this. And in fact, as part of the individual reviews, you may even want to be kind of having an overlap there where we're talking about from an individual how well they collaborate and how well they support their team to be psychologically safe. Might be an important part of extending that, and so that they meet each other. With regard to sprints and agiles and performance, Your teams, I mean, you're in a very, very dynamic environment if you're working that way. And what psychological safety does, and the work that we do, conductor audits and stuff, what they do is they support the team's ability to do that. You're in dynamic problem solving. Every single day, there's a specific task that you're trying to do, but it's creativity, it's collaborative. We got to learn to work together. We got to feel respected. We got to feel that we matter. All the rest of that stuff. So these three things actually work nicely beside each other. In fact, I think if you didn't have the psychological safety piece, if you weren't looking at that, that you might be missing something. You might be missing something. I think when you put it in there, it nicely supports both of those.
So we got our definition from Keith regarding equity. So intrinsic equity, not just paying or promoting, or is that the key driver of equity? So the question is equity in our model specifically related to basically dollars and remuneration?
Oh yeah, no, equity has nothing to do with dollars. It has a small part to do with dollars and remuneration. But equity, let me just get you a couple of questions here. Well, one of them is work is allocated fairly in my team. So the word equity, you just replace it with the word fair, and you'll get the same sense. Every member of my team is held accountable for their actions, right? So I'm always feeling picked on by the supervisor. How come, Bob or Pat just had a major blowout and nothing happened to them, right? So that's the sense of equity. It's really equitably. Are we treated equitably? Of course, remuneration and reward structures are going to play a part in that. But with regard to psychological safety, it's only a small part of the overall construct. All right, what else have we got?
All right, I think that's about it for questions. If I've missed you, I apologize, and please throw your question in and I'll catch it. But so far, it looks like that was it.
Hey, Ken, you're absolutely right. Sorry, Lou, to interrupt there, but Ken, I just saw Ken's comment, right? He says, I think that psychological safety, mental health has been ignored in the workplace for so long. Thanks, guys. You're absolutely right, Ken. And this is the work that we do, and we just see it time and time and time again. But what we also see that in this resurgence or this surge of awareness of this stuff, organizations and managers that do this, they actually perform, and their teams perform strikingly better than the traditional command and control, just do as I say, right? That type of message. So we're loving the work that we do, and we'd love, Ken, to talk to you about the work that you're doing in your organization. It'd be great to catch up.
Yeah. So Yves Olivier had just a question. Can you provide an example of candid communication?
Yeah. So candid communication is not overlooking the tough stuff. So as managers, what we do is it's really tough to be to give people bad news or to kind of correct a mistake or bad behavior or something like that. And yet what ends up, if we don't do that, we then actually are rewarding or ignoring bad behavior. And then that bad behavior starts to pick up. And on a team, that actually becomes the kind of the worm in the apple, right? It starts to affect the entire team. So candid communication is to sit down with someone and say, Pat, I just listened to the call you had with that particular customer, and I don't think it went very well. And here's why, right? So boomity boom, neutral, and yet dealing with the issues, and then also be with some kind of corrective suggestion or answer or open to a discussion, not being punitive, not pointing the finger, not making the person feel bad, but talking about what they did rather than themselves, and then listening to, and you're catching me on the fly here. So, I might do it a little bit differently if I had another 30 seconds to think about it, but that type of thing, not looking away from behavior that doesn't suit the norms that we're trying to identify, but yet in doing so in such a way that people feel supported. So gently corrected, if you will, and then supported so that they can actually do better. Does that make sense?
It's an interesting thing, because it's important to be able to speak plainly with somebody, but in order for that communication to be effective, it's important to have that trust built with the person so that they understand that you're not coming from a place of negativity or anything like that. Where you're coming from is a place of moving the team forward as a unit together.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, it's great. So we need to teach leaders to do that more effectively. I think most leaders do not, most managers and certainly, supervisors, oftentimes supervisors have been promoted from the ranks because they've been good at whatever the ranks are doing. And they're not given appropriate training in order to how to effectively manage the team. And so, so then they don't know how to do this well. So they either ignore the bad behavior, or they do it poorly, which again exacerbates the problem. And so, one of the solutions here is to let's find ways of teaching people who get promoted from non-management positions, non-leadership positions into leadership, some of the basics of this. Some people do it intuitively. Many people do not do it intuitively. Yeah, that's right, Johanna. Yeah, you got it. The Peter principle. Yeah. Good.
Takeshi made an interesting point. It's easier to measure tangible stuff like dollars or output, but usually it's more difficult to measure behavior. What I think we're saying is that behavior precedes the results.
Yeah, Takeshi, you're absolutely right. I mean, imagine that you came in on Monday and there was no people. So there's no behavior, and therefore, but there's absolutely going to be no results. And so we know already that people are responsible for the output, and we know that good teams. We know this already. I mean, this just from your own experience, right? That good teams actually perform at a higher level. And so just multiply that by all the teams in your organization, and it makes sense. But you're absolutely right. Senior management who is sitting there with the pages of numbers and market pressure to do better and get better numbers, it's easy for them to communicate with numbers. And so it goes down the line. CEO says to executives, get the numbers. And executives say to managers, get the numbers. And managers say to supervisors, get the numbers. And supervisors say to their staff, get the numbers. And the staff has got to turn to the customers and say, hi, may I help you? So where is this learned, right? And what I'd like to do is I'd like to see this, and we've seen organizations like this, they do this well all the way up to the top, and it's a much, much different organization to work in. Anything else? I call it leaders everywhere. Way to go, Ken. Yeah.
Absolutely. Everyone's a leader, aren't they?
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, I think it's 8 minutes past the hour. Thank you for your presence, for showing up. We'll see you again in 3 weeks today. And we'll talk about sales, and we'll have some cowboy references perhaps. But in the meantime, have fun. Reach out to Lewis, myself, Karen, any of the team, Nat in North America, and we'd love to chat with you about how we can help you in your organization and your clients.